High school was a daunting chapter of my life, marked by relentless bullying. My books were torn, I was beaten, and subjected to a barrage of hurtful names. The bullies, always inventive in their cruelty, devised a new torment. Knowing my fear of the dark and ghosts, they proposed a sinister challenge: spend an entire night in the cemetery. If I endured this ordeal, they promised to stop tormenting me and even consider me brave. Fearful but desperate for acceptance, I reluctantly agreed. Around 6 p.m. they escorted me to the cemetery. The vastness of the graveyard, coupled with its eerie ambiance, sent shivers down my spine. After they dropped me off, darkness descended rapidly, accompanied by the distant barking of dogs and the haunting hoots of owls. I yearned for time to pass quickly so I could escape with the morning light. Exhausted, I dozed off with my head resting on a tombstone. A sudden touch on my shoulder jolted me awake. Blurry-eyed, I saw a figure, a creepy smile etched on its face right in front of me. As I rubbed my eyes, it vanished, leaving a cold chill in its wake. I grabbed my flashlight, scanning the surroundings, but saw only critters scurrying away from the light. Was it my imagination playing tricks, or just some small animals? Remembering the rules, I knew I couldn't leave the cemetery compound, as they would conduct periodic checks. Despite the fear, leaving was not an option. I decided to find a better spot to sleep, and as I walked, I noticed shadows near a tree. Assuming it was the bullies coming to check on me, I waved and called out. Silence. The figure turned around, the same eerie grin on its face, and started approaching, then running towards me. Panic set in, and I ran, tripped, and turned to see it vanish again. To compound my woes, the fall had broken my flashlight. Leaving was tempting, but the fear of intensified bullying held me back. I continued, using my phone as a dim flashlight. In the distance, I heard distant barks and a woman's blood-curdling scream. Frozen in terror, I stood, not knowing where to go. The scream emanated from the direction I was heading. The opposite way led to the spot where I encountered the guy with the creepy grin. The dilemma paralyzed me. Was this a product of my imagination, or was the place haunted? For what felt like an eternity, I stood there, frantically pointing my phone towards any subtle sound, trying to decipher the cryptic events of that harrowing night. A whisper in the air warned me, "We won't let you go back." Following that, a sudden weight pressed on my shoulders and my hands trembled uncontrollably. A sharp pain shot through my arm, and I discovered a bite mark, hastily wrapping it with a handkerchief. I ran aimlessly, footsteps echoing behind me. Tripping on a tombstone, I fainted. I think I hit my head on something. As I lost consciousness, I remember seeing a little kid squatting and sitting in front of me and smirking. The next morning, a security guard woke me with a splash of water. "Hey, what are you doing here? Are you okay?" I frantically unwrapping my handkerchief to show him the bite mark. It had vanished. Bewildered, he questioned me, but I couldn't articulate what had happened. I got up and fled the cemetery on my bicycle, vowing never to return. As for the bullies, they faced suspension, as other students had also lodged complaints against them as well. In my early 20s, finding employment proved to be a struggle. I faced rejection from various places: McDonald's, KFC, Starbucks, the whole lot. Just when things seemed bleak, a call came, offering me the night shift security guard position at a cemetery. Although not my first choice, the desperation for any job left me with little room to negotiate. During the meeting with the manager to get my uniform, he disclosed a peculiar detail. The predecessors for the night shift had all quit for various reasons, explaining the slightly higher pay. A curious chill ran down my spine, but the need for income overshadowed my concerns. As I started my first night duty, I patrolled the expansive cemetery. The manager had explained the duty of periodically leaving my small room to prevent potential grave robbing. The initial nights were uneventful, marked only by the occasional strange sound echoing in the stillness. Despite the eeriness of the graveyard, the job was somewhat enjoyable, offering decent pay for relatively easy work. However, on the 8th night, the tranquil routine took a disconcerting turn. From my cabin, I heard distinct sounds of digging and shoveling, reminiscent of grave-digging activities. Armed with a flashlight, I ventured out, combing the grounds for any disturbances. Oddly, there was no evidence of any excavation or disturbance. On my way back, I felt an uncanny sensation of someone breathing on my neck. Turning around hastily, I found no one, yet faint laughter, resembling that of children, echoed through the air. I yelled, "Is anyone here? Trespassing is not allowed?" Wondering if maybe I was falling ill, I went back to the cabin. Nothing else eventful happened that night. The 9th night heightened my unease to new levels. I left my cabin for the usual rounds. As I was returning, I noticed a shadow with hands pressed against my room's window, as though someone was watching me. I ran to see who it was. As I approached, the lights flickered and eventually turned off, plunging the area into darkness, and when I managed to restore them, the mysterious figure had vanished into thin air. Fear gnawed at me. Was my sanity slipping away? Was it less sleep? Soon enough, knocking on my window followed, but I saw no one near the window, and as I went outside to investigate, a small girl appeared, turning her head towards me and emitting a piercing scream. In panic, I dropped my flashlight only to find no one when I hastily picked it up. Terrified, I retreated into my cabin, questioning the wisdom of taking on this job out of desperation. The next day, I recounted the bizarre events to my manager. Afraid I was going to quit, my manager granted me a day off, urging me to catch up on sleep. Convincing myself that it was all a product of my imagination. There are no ghosts. It's all one's thoughts. I spent the day in blissful oblivion. The next day I got ready for my shift. During my rounds that night, I realized someone was mirroring my movements. Another set of footsteps echoed mine. When I sped up, they matched my pace, and when I slowed down, they mimicked me exactly. Frustrated, I shouted into the darkness, "Cut it out! If you continue this prank, you are going to regret it!" As I finished my round, I heard rustling leaves nearby. Pointing my flashlight toward the sound revealed a figure crawling between gravestones. Fear surged through me. I had no intention of investigating that. Sprinting back to my cabin, I drank some water and sat down, drenched in sweat, pondering the inexplicable events of the night. I now fully understood why the other guards left. After a while, knocking on my door accompanied by a whispering apology. "Sorry, sir, we won't do it again," suggested that the pranksters were confessing. Annoyed, I stepped outside, determined to give the culprits a piece of my mind. However, when I opened the door, there was no one in sight. Suddenly, a forceful kick to the back of my leg sent me crashing to the ground. Bewildered and shaken, I retreated into my cabin, vowing not to step outside until morning. With the break of dawn, I decided I had enough. I handed in my resignation to the manager, who thanked me for my service. Walking away from the cemetery, I promised myself never to work in such a place again. My buddies and I love finding random spots to hang out, drink, and have a good time. One day, Sam suggested something different. Why not go to the nearby graveyard, tell some scary stories, and enjoy? He wanted to bring life to the usually somber place. Intrigued by the idea of adventure, we all agreed. That night, we arrived at the cemetery. Adam brought his tent so we could sleep over and leave the next day. Climbing over the wooden fence surrounding the graveyard, we explored the area. It was eerie, but the sense of adventure kept us going. Finding a spot to pitch the tent, we settled down with a few drinks, sharing laughs and reminiscing about old stories. Feeling mischievous, I thought it would be fun to flash the torch on my face and tell ghost stories. Each of us exaggerated tales of ghostly encounters and how we bravely handled the situation. During our storytelling, Sam suddenly pointed out a figure sitting on a gravestone in the distance. When we turned to look, nothing was there. We turned back to look at Sam. He suddenly shrieked and told us that creature was momentarily right behind us. We laughed at Sam. We thought he was trying to scare us, even though I laughed at I deep down felt something eerie as well. We told Sam to chug a beer and enjoy and not think about this. He smiled and agreed. As the night progressed, the usual sounds of critters and owls filled the air. Suddenly we heard rustling in the bushes. We all turned our flashlights toward the sound. No animals was there, but we saw a faint blue, flickering light. Gripping our flashlights tightly, we braced ourselves. What is that light, we thought? It is close enough so it can't be from the city. Was it our buzz finally kicking in? A sudden rustle made us jump, only to find a small rat scurrying out. We chuckled nervously, trying to ease our tension. After more drinks and chatter, we decided to retire to the tent for the night. I needed to pee, so went up to the bushes, and there, at a distance of about 100 meters, I saw a lanky figure pointing at me and sprinting in my direction. Terrified, I sprinted back to the tent, thankful it wasn't too far away. I explained to the guys that something was amiss. I didn't know if it was the alcohol, but something had chased me. The guys saw the fear in my eyes and believed me. As we huddled in the tent, we heard footsteps circling around, and a tall, lanky silhouette walked by. The flashlight was on in our tent, so whatever this is knows we are here. Frozen in fear, we didn't dare to move or even reach for the flashlight. The creature emitted a strange, ominous screeching sound we had never heard before. It bent down near our tent zipper, and we feared it would enter. Miraculously, it didn't. We watched its silhouette fade away, and we stayed put, not daring to leave the safety of the tent. Throughout the night, we stayed cautious, not getting a second of sleep. We heard occasional screeches, but the creature never came too close. At the first light of day, we bolted out of there, leaving the tent behind. We made a pact, never to drink in such places, and never to venture into a cemetery again.